Today, I'm going to go over prepper supplies and the things that you need to make sure you have for the next crisis. Hey, my name's Jack, and I'm a co-founder of SkilledSurvival.com and TheResilientLife.com. I've been sharing my information on websites, these two websites, since 2013, and we've helped literally millions of people have visited these websites to help figure out how to prepare and how to survive. So today I want to talk about your prepper supplies. And before we get started, I just want to talk about, last time we talked about gear. If you want to see that video, go below, click the link, and you'll go to the gear video. Today it's supplies. And what's the difference, right? What's the difference? Well, in my mind, gear is more items and tools that you use to prepare. So for instance, water storage container is a tool you use to store water, and water being one of the first supplies we're going to talk about. So supplies are items that you use up, that you consume. Items are things that you can trade, that people need on a continuous basis. So let's hop right into the first one. I already talked about it. It's water. This is a water storage container. So the container is the gear, but what you put in it, the water, is the supply. So you need a nice supply of water. If you're new to this, you need to start with what I recommend, about 2 weeks worth of water. And the way you calculate that is a gallon per person per day, period. Some people go with a half gallon. I don't think that's enough because you use water to drink, obviously, and you also need water for sanitation and cleanup and also for cooking food. So water is something that I'd rather have a little more of than not enough. Also, if you want to move into more advanced water supply stockpiling, so the stockpiling is what you want before the crisis starts. Now, after the crisis happens, you start using your water supplies. Immediately, you're going to want to have a new way to get more water, right? Some people have wells, and so they can buy emergency well pumps that they could pump the water out of their well if the electricity is off. Another way is to do rainwater collection off your roof, and you can have a system there. So there's many ways to get new fresh water in, and you want to make sure you have a water filter and all those things. So, but water, very important. Everybody knows it. Learn how to do it. Start stockpiling it. Figure it out. The second major survival supply that everyone thinks of, it's not a big surprise, is food. Now, there's a lot of ways to go about food. Here's some food from Valley Food Storage. This is stuff I've bought. I've also bought some from Legacy Foods. I tend to look for deals on freeze-dried food. I like freeze-dried food because it can sit on my shelf for 25, 30 years. I don't have to worry about it. I'm not eating this stuff unless I absolutely have to, so I'm not too worried about it being absolutely perfect as far as health-wise. I mean, obviously I don't want it to be trash, but in an emergency, any calories are going to be a good calorie if I start consuming this stuff. So I'm looking for a good deal, right? And so I recommend you check out those two websites for deals that come around. I recommend, if you have no food, to get some right away. And then after that, once you have like 2 weeks worth of food, then you can look at maybe expanding that with new deals and whatnot. So, but getting your food in place. Number two, prepper supply that you need. The third prepper supply that I think you need for sure is medical supplies. Now, in the gear video that I just told you about, we focused on survival gear, so you can buy these pouches and you can buy these kits and things like that, IFAK pouches, and I considered that kind of gear. But within that are supplies. So a tourniquet would be gear, but like the bandages and the wraps and the ointments and things like that, I consider supplies. You're going to use them once, and then eventually you're going to need more. So right here is an example of a lot of supplies, okay? You have gauze rolls, gauze pads, antibacterial creams, gloves, burn creams, insect sting creams, etc. So all that kind of medical stuff you're going to use up, you probably want to buy a little extra of that, right? Because in an emergency, you start using your creams and things like that over time, you could run out, okay? So those supplies are good. And you can always trade with somebody else. It's a bartering tool. So if somebody doesn't have any of those medical supplies and you have some extra, you could trade them some supplies for some more food or ammo or what have you. So it's never a bad thing to have some extra medical supplies available. Okay, next up, that I think everybody should have as a supply, a prepper supply in their home, is ammo. Here's a small sample of some of the ammo I have. This is 22 long rifle. It's pretty standard. I have a 22 rifle, so you want a lot of these for hunting game. This is not the best home defense ammo for sure. All I know is you need to have ammo. You need to store it properly. You need it in containers that are sealed. You need to put desiccants in there and make sure it sits somewhere where it can't flood. Things like that. And I highly recommend you take any ammo out of their cardboard boxes and put them into some kind of storage container where you're not introducing any moisture. So some of that cardboard can have a little bit of moisture in it. And if it sits inside somewhere where it's sealed up, that moisture could kind of compromise the ammo over long periods of time. So store it right, get lots of it for whatever firearms you have. And again, it's another thing you could trade if you have a lot of it and somebody else doesn't and they need it. So it's a good thing to have. Okay, next up on the list is fuel. And when I say fuel, I mean potentially gasoline. And the other one I think of is firewood. Okay, we're talking a way to heat your home, a way to run your vehicle. Okay, any kind of stored energy that then you could use up as a supply and take care of your family. Okay, so you probably, if you have a wood stove or you're running a rocket stove, which again is a prepper gear, you're going to want to feed that with firewood, and you don't want to have to chop down the tree in your backyard to do so, at least right away. Obviously, if things got really, really bad out there for multiple years, all bets are off. But just for the basics, just to get started, you need a nice pile of firewood in order to protect your family, especially if you live somewhere where it gets cold in the winters. Okay, you're going to have a way to warm your home or cook your food. Same thing with gasoline. And the gasoline's another reason if you have a traditional generator that takes gasoline, you're going to have some of that on hand when winter comes and you're running a generator to try and heat your home and things like that. Now, gasoline has a shelf life, and you can add additives to the gasoline in order to help prolong that, or you can rotate it, okay? But you also think about where you're storing this. If you have a massive amount of gasoline and they're all in these containers and you put them up in your garage or in your basement, it's probably not the best. But if you put it in a storage shed outside, it could get really hot out there and there could be issues with that. So you got to really think and plan about where you're putting your gasoline storage, and you have to look into your local laws as far as what's legally allowed. How much can you store before you start getting into trouble there? So, but anyway, long story short, your fuel type prepper supplies, you need to figure that out. All right, next up is kind of related to food in some ways. It's seeds. I think every prepper should have some seeds on hand, heirloom seeds. They should be in some kind of a container and sealed packaging that makes sure that they're good for multiple years. You don't want to have seeds, plant them, and then find out they all are duds because they went bad on you. So I bought this several years ago. It's just a survival seed vault. There's a lot of them online. You can find more information about those online. It's basically a garden in a can. Open this up, you see there's a bunch of these individual packets. Yeah. Here's some beans and some broccoli and some peppers and on. See, the whole thing's full of them. But these are nice Mylar pouches that are in this can, and I keep this in the refrigerator to keep everything cold and keep everything good for multiple years is the hope. So I think everybody should invest in a few seeds. It doesn't take that much. You put it in your fridge and then you have something that you can produce some food. You can trade this to other people potentially. And if they're heirloom seeds, you can learn the art of seed saving, where you would see some of the fruit that you produce, you could save some of those seeds and hopefully try to plant those next year so that you could have a perpetual system of producing foods and never really run out. Next on the list is money. I'm talking cash, gold, and silver. Okay. You should have some of that in your home. Okay. Now, I do caution you that if you have a lot of gold and a lot of silver, and we ever get to the point in the future where you're having to trade somebody a gold bar for something, I do caution you, you're putting a target on your back in a sense. Like, if somebody knows you have a ton of gold and they have a lot of firearms and ammo and they're not a nice guy, then they know that you have gold. So they could target you and your family to relieve you of that gold in times when there's no law enforcement or no ethics as much in a super serious long-term crisis. Okay. But you should have some gold, some silver coins that you could trade strategically, carefully, should times ever get that desperate. Okay. And some people like to have some gold because it's just an inflationary hedge. You can put some gold in your portfolios. You can take some gold physically in your home, some silver coins and whatnot. It's just a good thing to have just in case, right? And that's what we're all about here when it comes to preparedness, is just being prepared for anything, right? I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what the next disaster is going to be, but I know that having gold and silver and some cash on hand helps me have some resources no matter what the crisis could be in the future, right? And that's the point. It makes me more resilient as a human being, as a person. So I highly recommend having some. You decide on how much. If you're really concerned, maybe do a bit more. If you're not so concerned, just do a little bit. But either way, it's a resource that everyone should have. The next pepper supply everybody should have in their home is a lot of toilet paper. Okay, we learned this recently with the pandemic. There was a run on toilet paper. People freaked out. This is the one item people thought about, oh no, I should have this. But here's the deal. If you're a real prepper, you don't wait in lines. You don't freak out. You don't go to the store in a crazy scenario like that. Like, here it is, this pandemic's going on and everybody's flooding the stores to get toilet paper. Like, that's where you're going to get sick potentially. And if the pandemic was even worse than it was, if the death rate and the mortality rate were extremely worse, you were going to risk your life for some TP? No, thank you. So get it ahead of time. Get it now. Now's the time to be buying it and stockpiling it and forgetting about it and not touching it. This stuff will last a really long time. Just make sure it doesn't get wet. Make sure it doesn't mold or anything like that. You can do a rotation if you'd like, and they also make these little wet tabs you can buy. They cost a little bit more, but they save a ton of space. So that could be an option for you as well if you're looking for a way to stockpile an emergency supply of toilet paper or sanitary wipes. And I'd also say baby wipes and things like those come in handy when you don't want to use your water supply necessarily, but you just want to clean up a little bit, clean your face, clean your hands, and feel somewhat fresh without wasting water. Okay, so TP, sanitary wipes, those are all supplies that you should have in your home for the next crisis. Okay, next up is what I call vices, things that people want to have, and if they're not available, they will have withdrawals in a sense. So they're a vice because they are a little bit addicted to them. So first comes to mind is cigarettes. Another one comes to mind is alcohol. Here's some whiskey. Have some of those supplies in your home, and then you could trade them to people who are desperate at some point. It's a fair trade, right? Hey, you really need a drink. You haven't had one in a while. I'll trade you this for that, right? Or maybe you like to consume some of these vices and you're just like worried, hey, if things get really bad, I need this. So I know when they put curfews and time limits and restrictions on some of the alcohol stores around where I live, there's a huge run on alcohol. So you just know when things are limited in that way, people are going to want to have that. So you want to get that ahead of time. The next prepper supply I think everybody should own is batteries. Okay, so we have a lot of devices that use a lot of batteries. What's really cool is if you can get some gear, like some recharging using the sun, solar gear that you could use to recharge batteries, you can use like what's called the USB battery, where you basically take the top off and plug it into any kind of USB port and have it recharge as long as you have either solar or something like that. Or use just basic rechargeable batteries. I mean, either way, rechargeable is great. Or you can just buy a lot of regular batteries as well. So here's an example of some batteries that I have. These are not my battery supply that I have in my preparedness area. This is just the stuff we use on a daily basis. This is a good way to organize them. This organizer is pretty sweet, actually. It makes it so it's really easy, and I don't have batteries just laying around everywhere. But having a good supply of batteries is a wise thing to put in your preparedness supply checklist. Make sure you get some of those. All right, so that's the 10 things I think every house should own as far as prepper supplies before the next crisis. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in becoming more resilient, I highly recommend you check out the Resilient Life. We'll put a link in the description below, but basically it's a membership that of like-minded folks who are trying to help each other get better. It's a system where you can progress and see your progression. Also, check us out at skilledsurvival.com. We're always putting out new content, and make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell on this video. We always appreciate that. So stay safe, and we'll see you next time.